Mental development, bhavita-citta. The principal characteristic of an enlightened person's mind is freedom, which is the result of wisdom. When a person sees things according to the truth, fully comprehending conditioned phenomena, the mind is released from the control of the defilements. The scriptures usually describe the perfection of freedom as follows. The mind which has been fully cultivated by wisdom is released from the tense asava. When one knows and sees in this way, the mind is released from the tent of sense desire, the tent of becoming, and the tent of ignorance. One aspect of freedom from defilement is the end of enslavement to alluring and provocative sense objects. The Buddha said that sense objects are the basis for greed, hatred, and delusion. Also, the absence of an impulse to act or unjustly or harmfully guarantees moral rectitude. Another aspect of freedom is the absence of fear, trepidation, and terror. An arahant has mastery over sense objects and is thus described as one who has trained the sense basis, i.e., he or she has completed the development of the sense faculties, indriya bhavana. This means that when cognizing a sense object, for example a sight or a sound, and a natural recognition of agreeableness, disagreeableness, or neutrality arises, arahants can control perception, sanya, as they wish. For example, they can perceive the repulsive as unrepulsive, or perceive the unrepulsive as repulsive, as well as abandon both the repulsive and the unrepulsive, dwelling equanimous and mindful. Possessing mindfulness and self-mastery, an arahant is called one who has been trained, and a self-conqueror, the greatest of those victorious in battle. An arahant's mind is stable and does not tremble as a consequence of agreeable or disagreeable sense objects. It is like a mountain, which is not shaken by the wind, or like the earth, which bears all things, and is neither angered nor offended when filthy items are cast upon it. An additional aspect of freedom is non-clinging, which the Buddha often compared to a lotus leaf, which is not adhered to by water, or a lotus blossom, which grows in the mud, but is pure, clean, and beautiful. A person begins by not clinging to sensuality, to merit, and to good and evil, as clinging to these things is the cause for brooding over the past and yearning for the future. A bhikkhu who has realized the Dhamma does not grieve over the past and does not fantasize over the future. He is sustained by what is present, and thus his complexion is bright. As for the ignorant, they fantasize over the future and pine over the past. Thus they are haggard, like a fresh reed that has been plucked and left in the sun. In the bhavita-citta sutta, there is a similar passage. One should not pursue the past, nor yearn for the future. The past has gone away, the future has not yet been reached. not brooding over the past and not yearning for the future are classified here as aspects of the citta, not of wisdom. They correspond to the domain of emotion. There are terms describing the attributes of an arahant with respect to the past and future that are matters of wisdom. For example, reminiscence of past lives, purbe ni wa sanusati yana, knowledge of the decease and rebirth of beings, kutu pa ta yana, knowledge of the past, atitamsa yana, and knowledge of the future, anagatamsa yana. Arahants draw upon knowledge of the past and use wisdom to consider future activities. Indeed, because an arahant's heart is free from the past and future, knowledge concerning the past and future can be used by wisdom in the most beneficial way. In addition, an arahant's actions are generally performed to assist future generations, as was explained earlier. Some of the aspects of an arahant's mind will be at odds with the views of ordinary people, since superficially these aspects are considered unpleasant or blameworthy. One such aspect that the Buddha mentioned often is nisara or nisara, which can be translated as hopeless, wishless, or without expectation. This hopelessness or absence of wishing of an enlightened person has a more profound meaning, however, than that which most people usually consider. Ordinary human beings normally live with hope. This hope is based on desire, wanting various things or wanting to be a particular way, thus hoping to obtain or to become. This hope sustains life. When someone is disappointed or feels hopeless due to not getting what is wished for, or due to the unattainability of an object, then that person is considered to have misfortune. When someone is gratified by obtaining what is wanted, or something desirable appears to be within reach, that person is considered to be fortunate. A hopeful person, however, still has a concealed expectation or anticipation that is constantly present, even if he is not conscious of it, that is, the possibility of being disappointed or falling into despair. This aspect of hope is often referred to as apprehension, which is a form of fear, a form of suffering. Hope thus comes paired with apprehension. If hope remains, fear remains. An arahant resembles the person who has lost hope, but there is an important distinction. An arahant's hopelessness or absence of expectation is not a consequence of there being no way to obtain what is desired. Instead, it results from an inner completeness and satiety. There is nothing lacking which must be wished for. There is no deficiency giving rise to desire and hope. In short, an arahant's freedom from hope stems from an absence of craving. When one does not yearn for things and does not long to be some particular way, then there is nothing to be hoped for. When there is nothing to be hoped for, then one lives without hope. One has given up or ended hope, along with the fear that springs from hope. This implies that people can exist without depending on or entrusting their life and happiness to hope. Arahants have gone beyond both gratification and hopelessness, as these terms are ordinarily defined, being fulfilled and content, They surpass those who are gratified or hopeful. This is a level that is superior to or free from hope, because there is complete happiness in each present moment. There is no opportunity for further disappointment or despair. Compare this with asaddha, faithlessness, as a wisdom quality. Many other heart qualities exist, which are related to those mentioned above. For example, akinkana, no anxiety, nothing lingering in the mind. Asoka, happy, sorrowless. Kema, secure, safe. Nichata, hungerless. Santa, no confusion, restlessness, worry, irritation, depression, boredom, or fear. Peaceful. Santuta, satisfied, contented. Siti bhuta, nibbutta, tranquil, cooled. Totally at ease while walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. Viraja, free from mental impurity, immaculate. In his teachings, the Buddha emphasized happiness, sukha. There are terms describing the state of nibbana as happiness, terms describing those who have realized nibbana as happy. Statements by such realized ones themselves describing their own happiness. For example, nibbana is the supreme happiness. Nibbana is indeed great happiness. There is no greater happiness than the happiness of nibbana. This is unsurpassed happiness. Truly the arahants are happy. One perfectly awakened always sleeps happily. One who is without anxiety is indeed happy. I, without anxiety, am indeed truly happy. And oh, what bliss! Even for those who are training in the Dhamma, it is necessary to view nibbana as happiness for the practice to be correct. As stated in the Buddha's words, monks, that someone who views nibbana as suffering will possess investigation conducive to the realization of truth. Anu lo mika kanti is impossible. That someone who does not possess investigation conducive to the realization of truth will proceed to the righteous way. Samatha ni yama is impossible. That someone who has not proceeded to the righteous way will realize the fruits of stream entry. Once returner, non-returner, or arahantship is impossible. Monks, that someone who views nibbana as happiness will possess investigation conducive to the realization of truth is possible. That someone who possesses investigation conducive to the realization of truth will proceed to the righteous way is possible. That someone who proceeds to the righteous way should realize the fruits of stream entry, once returner, non-returner, or arahantship is possible. Although nibbana is happiness, and those who have realized nibbana are happy, such realized ones do not cling to happiness of any kind, and do not become attached to or indulge in nibbana. When cognizing external sense objects, for example by way of the eye or ear, an arahant still experiences feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, connected with those objects, just like an ordinary person. An exception exists, however, in that an arahant experiences feelings without being constricted by defilement. An arahant neither rejoices over nor is troubled by feelings, nor are those feelings a cause for craving. Feelings exist at only one level, which is called experiencing feeling by way of the body, but not the mind. Feeling does not give rise to internal affliction or worry. Such feeling is said to be cooled. An arahant experiences feelings without latent tendencies, anusaya, unlike unenlightened beings who have the latent tendency of lust, raga nusaya, when experiencing pleasure, the latent tendency of hostility, patiganusaya, when experiencing pain, and the latent tendency of ignorance, avijjanusaya, when experiencing neutral feelings, perpetually increasing the habit and strength of these defilements. Pleasure and pain from external sources are unable to affect an arahant's internal happiness. An arahant's happiness is thus independent, not relying on external phenomena. It is an immaterial happiness, niramisa sukha, or even surpasses immaterial happiness. Ordinary niramisa sukha is the happiness of jhana. As an arahant's happiness is independent of external conditions, the natural fluctuation of things is not a cause for suffering. Even if the 6 sense objects change and pass away, an arahant still abides in happiness. Even if the 5 aggregates change and become otherwise, there is no sorrow or suffering. A thorough knowledge of impermanence brings about tranquility and contentment. The Buddha described this happiness as one attribute of being a refuge unto oneself, or of having the Dhamma as a refuge. Another important descriptive term for an arahant's mind, which covers many of the characteristics already mentioned, is aroga, translated as without sickness, or freedom from illness. It can also be rendered as health or healthy. Arogya is an epithet for nibbana. Being without illness or being healthy refers here to the absence of mental illness or to a healthy mind, as mentioned in the Buddha's teaching to an aged layman. You should practice and train yourself thus. Although the body is diseased, the mind will not be diseased. The Buddha said that there are 2 kinds of illness, physical and mental. Beings who can assert to be without illness of the mind are difficult to find in the world, with the exception of one who is free from the taints. These words of the Buddha illustrate that an arahant is a person with perfect mental health. The description of an arahant as being free of illness or in good health reveals the value of realizing nibbana. One may wonder, if arahants do not seek the pleasures cherished by ordinary people, how can they be happy, and what worth does nibbana have? An absence of illness is a condition of happiness that is complete in itself. It is far better than the happiness resulting from a temporary alleviation of pain, not to mention the discomfort of sickness and chronic ailments. Obtaining medicine or treating to allay symptoms of illness offers momentary happiness. The more severe the symptoms, the greater the happiness when the symptoms subside. From one perspective, a healthy person is denied the kind of pleasure, but one in their right mind would desire a sick person's happiness of waiting to savour the end of pain and discomfort. In the case of an illness, happiness is experienced through the repeated or occasional alleviation of discomfort and agitation. Such occasional happiness can be compared to the pleasure sought by ordinary people. The happiness of being without illness, which is normally not recognized as happiness, is simply internal ease and relief. This can be compared to the state of an arahant or to the happiness of nibbana. The Buddha applied the analogy of a leper with erupting sores due to irritation and itching. The leper scratches the lesions and heats his flesh over coals. The more he scratches and sears his body, the more itchy and inflamed do the sores become. The happiness and pleasant sensation he receives relies upon having a wound that can be scratched. The leper will remain in this state until a skilled doctor prepares the medicines that cures him of the leprosy. Cured of leprosy, he becomes a person in good health, aroga, happy, sukhi, free, seri, with self-mastery, sayamvasi, and able to go where he pleases, yena kamangama. Both the scratching of the sores and the heating by the fire, which used to provide him with pleasure and relief, are no longer considered by him as a form of happiness. He now regards such behavior as painful and miserable. This analogy can be applied to ordinary beings who seek pleasure from the 5 strands of sensuality. Although they experience pleasure through obtaining things and gratifying desire, they are inflamed by desire, experiencing increasing turmoil and agitation. When life is conducted in this manner, pleasure and delight only revolve around the arousal of craving, leading to increased passion. Gratification is sought by temporarily quelling the agitation. With the realization of nibbana, no fuel remains to provoke craving. The happiness is experienced without alleviating an inflammation. An unenlightened person is compared to someone who derives pleasure from scratching an itch. The greater the itch, the more one scratches, and the more one scratches, the greater the itch. And the greater the itch, the greater the pleasure from scratching. An ordinary person thus likes to increase the degree of pleasure by seeking ways to increase the stimulation and excitement, and so increases the itch. As a result, more pleasure is experienced from increasing scratching. A realized being is like someone who is cured from an itch-inducing illness, whose normal physical state is healthy. Happiness exists due to the absence of an itch and of a need to scratch. An ordinary person, however, may criticize such a person as lacking the pleasure derived from scratching an itch. Similarly, an unenlightened person's search for happiness is like building up and fanning a fire and then receiving amusement and coolness by extinguishing it. The brighter and hotter the fire, the more effort needed for extinguishing, causing a more spectacular crackling and flashing. An ordinary person conducts his life in this way, despite greater risks of danger for himself and others. Those who are liberated resemble persons who have extinguished the fire. They live in ease, coolness, and safety, with no need to be burnt, and with no need to be on guard against dangers from heat. They are not engaged in the thrill or anxiety of extinguishing a fire that they previously ignited. Realization brings about changes in personality as well as in attitudes towards the world. Such mental transformation can be compared to the development of a child into an adult. Adults no longer hold dear those toys and games that were cherished during childhood. An adult may be amused seeing a child fascinated with and possessive of such toys. Likewise, a person who has realized Nibbana has reached a stage of development that surpasses ordinary beings. Attitudes towards life, towards things admired by ordinary people, and towards the way people conduct their lives have changed.